Today we've got this incomplete computer here. It's got some decent parts on the inside, except for whatever this thing is. And the case is a little scratched up, and I noticed there's some rust on it for some reason. But I'm going to pull all these parts out of here, clean them up, and see what we can build out of this. Hey everybody, it's Chris from Family Geekery, and today we're going to be taking a look at this system here, this incomplete system that's got some decent parts to it. It's got a Gigabyte Aorus motherboard. We've got an i5-8600K processor, not the newest processor in the world, but certainly a very capable processor. We're missing obviously some other pieces. I see an SSD on here, so that's good, and we don't need this. But we're going to take all this stuff out of this case here, clean it up, get it built into a complete system, and then see if maybe I can get a different case for it, because I just don't like putting these nice parts into a case that's got some rust on it on the front. So let me get all these parts out of here, I'll lay them all out, and we'll see what we're starting with. Alright, so here's what I pulled out of that case, and there's a little bit more than what I bargained for. But we've got the Aorus Z370 Gaming 7 motherboard. That's a decent motherboard. Especially with that Z370 chipset, and it had in there the i5-8600K, so that's good to go. We had three 1 terabyte 2.5 inch SATA drives. They were tucked away in there in these little caddies in the back, and then one 1 terabyte WD black. So this is definitely a keeper. These I'll probably put up on the shelf with the rest of the stack of these things that someday I'll find some use for, but who knows. So we can go ahead and get some of this put back together. I'm going to have to grab some RAM, probably 16 gigs for this type of system, and find a cooler, because we got the remnants of some kind of a cooler that I'm not sure where the rest of it went, but we'll take that off and find a cooler that's fitting for this processor, and then we can start to piece it all together and get it bench tested. Alright, so I got rid of the parts that I didn't need and found some parts to complete this build. Here's a 16 gig kit, 2x8 of Crucial Ballistics RGB RAM, because why not? Why not RGB, right? And for a GPU, I want to try out this guy here, which is a RX 6600. So a Sapphire Radeon AMD based RX 6600. We'll see what this thing can do. And in this case was a power supply, an EVGA 850 gold. And I may save that for a more powerful system. So I think I've got a EVGA 550 gold, which will work just fine with this. So let me start getting some of these parts together. I do have a case that I found that should fit this motherboard just fine. We'll look at that later. So let me get the CPU on. I'll find a cooler for it, and we'll get this thing mocked up here. Alright, so if I fast forward through any of this stuff here and the editing, then just know that you can find step-by-step tutorials on how to put in RAM and CPU and SSD on many of my other PC builds, so check out the channel and see under the playlist PC builds. I've got plenty of things to show you how to do that. I did move the SSD down here since it's had its own heatsink. I didn't put it underneath this fancy one that's got the built-in heatsink, and I moved it down here versus here because we're going to have a graphics card there. We don't want to block any of the cooling to the hard drive. There should be nothing down here in the case, so this should be a good place for it. And so the next thing we're going to do is put a cooler on. So I've got this Be Quiet Pure Rock 2 black 150 watt TDP tower cooler, and it was open box at the local Micro Center, half price. So it says that it's complete. I popped it open at the store and looked, and it looked like it was mostly complete. So we're going to go ahead and try that out. These screws and brackets look like they've never even been opened, and the bottom of the tower cooler has never been applied to anything. So I'm confident that this thing's good to go. So let's start putting it together. Now if anybody watching this video is actually using the same cooler, then don't forget these little O-rings. It makes it a lot easier to install this back plate. Alright, this cooler went on so easily that it doesn't even warrant me showing you step by step. The instructions were that good, so it's all on there, it's good to go. The only thing I'm concerned of now is the height of this thing. I think it's too tall for the case I had in mind, but that's okay. I've got some more cases around here. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it to see what it's going to fit into. But this thing's on. We got the RAM, we got the CPU, the cooler, the hard drive. I think we're ready to hook up a power supply and see if we can post this thing. Alright, so the last couple projects just haven't gone exactly as expected. And let me catch you up on what's going on here. So I hooked up the power supply, booted it up, and it just would not boot. Now luckily this board has some real good diagnostics built in. It's got the 4 little LEDs that you can't see that light up in sequence that show the CPU and the graphics card and the memory and everything. Those are always handy. And then it's got these codes here also. Now what was happening was it was just boot looping, just constant boot looping. And the code that was coming up, you know, obviously you go to Google and check out what that is. And I found a lot of people with this same very problem, and that was it would not boot if there was memory in these 2 RAM slots. So normally you would have a chip here and a chip here, so like 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, depending on which way you're counting it, 1, 3, 2, 4. That gives you the dual channel. Now any memory that I put into these far left 2 slots would just cause the thing not to boot at all. And like I said, I found enough evidence on Google that this was widespread on this particular board. Now, when it came out years ago, could I have RMA'd it? Probably, but this is obviously not something that I knew was going to happen. Now, that is the risk of buying these things used, and sometimes, you know, you can't check everything on it, obviously, if you're buying it out of the trunk of somebody's car. So you win some and you lose some. Now, does that mean that this is a lost cause? Absolutely not. Now let me explain real quick what it actually means. So you've got 4 memory slots, 2 banks. Normally you would have them split up so that you would have dual channel. And dual channel means that you've got twice the bandwidth for anything that's going from the processor to the memory or from the memory to the processor. Since the processors have multiple cores, each of the individual cores can use different channels and they can talk to the memory faster. So either access or write memory faster. Now if you have single core, then obviously there's a little bit of a bottleneck there. But that all depends on what is asking for the memory, like what kind of process. Is the process a multi-core process or is it just a regular process? So in some instances this will slow things down, in some instances you will not notice at all. Now you still have 16 gigs of memory, so the amount of storage is the same. It's just a matter of having single channel versus dual channel. So if we look over here on Windows and we look into the hardware list, you can see, yep, I've got 16 gigs of memory and I've got 2 of the 4 slots filled. But if we look over here on the CPU-Z program, which is a free download that tells you all about your CPU, your motherboard, your memory, we can see certainly right here that is listed as single channel. So again, single channel will affect some performance, but not every program, not every game, not everything in the operating system uses multiple channels at once, multiple cores at once. So in reality, if you had a program or a game or something that was taking advantage of dual channel versus single channel, then you're going to see, I don't know, 10 to 15% difference in performance. But like I said, it's not the end of the world, it's just not optimal. Now when you're building something like this that you're looking for the absolute bang for the buck, then sometimes you don't have to have a perfect system, you just have to have something that's definitely still worth the money. And in this case, I would rather it working with all the channels working, but like I said, it's not the end of the world because this thing's still going to be able to perform, it's still going to be able to play games, it's still going to be a strong machine. It's just not going to be as strong as it could if this thing was, you know, perfect. So in the meantime, I tested out multiple different types of memory. You can see here now I've got some different memory on here than I had before. That's just a byproduct of testing out several different memory chips because I didn't know if it was the memory or if it was the motherboard. Tried different power supplies because there was a possibility that the power supply wasn't putting out enough for both channels. That wasn't the case. And in the meantime, I did get Windows completely installed and completely updated. So that's where we're at now. All right, so now that I've made a mess of everything here, I guess it's time to go ahead and get this thing into a case, get the new GPU on, and start doing some more tests on it. All right, speaking of cases, this is what I picked out here. This is a Thermaltake V250, and it looks like it's got 320mm RGB fans on there. So I'm guessing there's going to be some kind of either control switch up here, or if we're lucky, might be able to control that off the motherboard. I know this Gigabyte motherboard does have a DLED, is what they call it, but it should be an ARGB header that we'll be able to use. So we'll try that out. I did do a quick test fit, and the size of that cooler that we put on there is going to be recessed inside where the glass door is. So there is going to be enough room, and it's like that close. So we lucked out there. So I'm going to grab my my bag of hardware here, make sure that we get all these motherboard mounting studs in the right place for the motherboard, and then we'll start putting this thing together. All right, so sure enough, there is a fan controller on the back of here, and it's already mounted and pre-wired to those 3 fans. There's even another header here just for a regular fan. So there is a fan in the back that we can put on there to just power it up. It's got a SATA connector for power, and there is a cable that goes from that controller to a motherboard. Now, unfortunately, this would work on just about every motherboard you got out today. This is ARGB, but the motherboard that we have here is just a little bit too old. And if we look at the DLED here, that is a 3-pin altogether. There's no blank space. So I'm sure they do make a converter for this, but that's not worth it. You can have the reset switch, which this is already pre-wired to the reset switch, and that goes up to the top here, and nobody really uses the reset switch on their computer anymore, so they use that to control, you know, little controllers like this. So it'll let you go through some preset settings of different fan lights and stuff, and we'll check that out once we get to it. It is bent a lot, so this is not the normal direction it's supposed to go, and I'm kind of afraid to bend it down to where it's supposed to go. Looks like when they put the case back door on, they smashed that up. So let's hope that it works. It looks like the pins are intact, and if it gets in the way too much, I will try to bend those down, and worst case scenario, we can always solder them back on or something. But I think we'll be good to go with that. So let's go ahead and start getting this motherboard in here. All right, so I got all the standoffs in the right place. It was missing these 3, not missing, but they weren't installed. But they were installed down here, so this is good to go. It's a nice little chart here that shows ATX uses screw holes 1, 2, and 3, so all that's good to go. You get the Ford out here if it was a eATX. But these did come with it, so we did put those on. What didn't come with it was one of these. And if you don't have one of these that comes with your case, shame on you, Thermaltake, for not including it. These things are a little lifesaver. Use a Phillips head screwdriver on this end and put it on top of your standoffs there, and it just gives you an easy way to, you know, to tighten them down. Now, you don't want to use this to torque the thing and strip that hole out, but it is nice to just get a good snug thing on it without having to grab, you know, needle nose and kind of twist them around that way and scratch up your case and everything. So you always want to do that and check the existing ones that were already installed. There was 1 or 2 that were a little loose, and you don't want those things loose, because if they come out when you're unscrewing a hole from a motherboard, then they're stuck behind there, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. So I got those in the right place. I'm going to put the IO shield in here. I'm going to route this cable back behind to where that fan controller was, and then let's get this motherboard down. All right, get the motherboard all mounted up in there, and we got a couple millimeters of clearance here, which is exactly what the book said. I think there was like a 3 millimeter difference between what the spec said on the height of the cooler and the depth of the case. So thank goodness for 3 millimeters. Got that taken care of. Let's get the power supply in here and start wiring up the power supply, and then we'll start wiring up some of the front IOs. All right, I got everything wired up, all the front panel, all the power supply, everything halfway tidied up in the back. I never tidied all the way up until I do a test boot and make sure everything works, so I don't have to cut tie wraps on anything. I got this guy still hanging out here. Once I get the new GPU in there, then I'll figure out where the best place to get this guy to feed through is. So let's go ahead and get that GPU installed, get some power to it, and I think we're ready for a test boot. Alright, so it's a small card, but I'm expecting good performance from it. So we got it wired in. I'll clean this up after we're all done, and I think we're ready for a test fire here. So let's hit this power button. And good, the fan in the back there is blowing. That's coming off of that fan controller in the back. And we do have RGB on the front here. I still got the protective screen on this. This is, I believe that's tempered glass in the front also, so that's good. 3 RGB fans. Let's see if the reset switch actually controls them. Yep. So we can pick different sequences, different colors. And I may be able to download the software for the motherboard and change the lighting of the actual motherboard, so we'll check that out. But first, I need to, the monitor did come up. It's over here. I don't have my capture card hooked up right now. So let's go ahead and get some drivers loaded up on here. I'll see if I can find the software for the RGB part of the motherboard, and we'll get a little benchmark or something going. Alright, so I was able to find the drivers for the graphics card, of course, and the RGB fusion. So we got that going blue. The memory slots, if I make them the same color blue as this, they turn out green, so I went with the darker blue. No biggie. RGB is just extra anyway, so got the fans kind of matching the background there, gave it an Intel blue instead of the AMD red. So that's looking good, even though we've got the AMD card in here, but that's alright. So let's go ahead and go on over to the screen capture, and I am running here a benchmark, just Heaven. This is just an older benchmark. That's just a real good tool, free tool, just to make sure everything's running right and it's getting all kinds of FPS. So over 200 FPS on this, which for a budget PC, a budget gaming PC, is good. I've had some a lot worse than that. I've had some a lot better than that. But that's about what I was expecting from this 6600. So I'm pretty happy with it. But the real test is obviously hooking up whatever game that you enjoy and playing that game and seeing how it works, because every game is different. Every game wants something different out of your computer. Every game is looking for a different component or a different amount of memory or a different, whatever. So obviously your mileage will vary with any kind of combination of hardware that you put together. But as far as like just all around good bang for the buck, this 8600 CPU and this 6600 GPU is going to be a decent combination that'll play most games today. So really the only thing we got left to do is put the doors back on it, tidy up a couple cables in the back there. They're halfway tidied up right now, and that's about it. This guy is done. Like I said before, I'm not super concerned about the memory. It is what it is, really. Nothing you can do about it. Is it worth ripping out this motherboard and throwing in another motherboard, buying another motherboard for $100, $150 to replace that? I don't think so. I would say whoever ends up with this, just rock this system just how it is until it's time to upgrade, both your CPU and your motherboard, and then just upgrade them both at the same time. So I'm going to consider this one done. I'm going to box it up, get on to other things. We got more parts around here that we need to put together into systems, so stay tuned on the channel and you'll see more and more builds coming up here. So that is going to wrap it up for this one. Like I said, I kind of skipped a lot of steps on this particular build just to keep the length down a little bit. And if you want to find out anything about how I did any part of this particular build, either just throw me a question down there in the comments below, or you can check out the rest of the channel. Anytime you see a video called like how to build a gaming PC or something like that, then I've got several other PC builds that I kind of talk all the way through it. But hopefully this was enjoyable to you. Hopefully you laugh at every time that I mess something up, like the stupid memory in this case. It seems recently that there's something bites me every single time, but hey, when you've built hundreds of computers like me, you eventually have problems here and there, and you just learn to live with it. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, I always appreciate a thumbs up. That helps me out. And if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button too. But thank you as always for watching. Until next time, peace out and geek out.